you have a great admiration for people who don't even exist? Do you know histories of fake worlds better than you know your own? Do you geek out? If so, geek out with us. Here, now. It's the Geek for All Show.
Hey, welcome back everybody to the Geek for All Show. I'm your host, Geekmeister, and with me is Winchester.
Hello.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
So we just got done seeing Doctor Strange, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Just right off the bat, definitely go check this one out.
Yeah.
So much fun. I think that's like the big thing. Like, you know, really like good movie, some really cool, interesting things going on from just like an analytical standpoint. But at the end of the day, fun, just a lot of fun. I had so much fun sitting there in the theater and doing this, watching the film. You know,
I was really impressed with it. To be honest, I've been kind of burnt out on Marvel, the MCU. To be like, there's just been so much coming out that I've been very burnt out on it, and not really like, we didn't go see this one at midnight. And to be honest, like, there was at one point, like, we haven't seen the new X-Men movie that came out. We, just the superhero stuff kind of, I'm not as excited about necessarily. I kind of regret not seeing this one at midnight because I was like, oh, we'll see it eventually. Maybe like if it comes out, once it comes out to Redbox or whatever. Definitely glad I saw it in theaters. It was way better than I thought it was going to be.
Oh yeah, no, and the visual effects that they're doing in this movie really warrant a very large screen for you to enjoy that.
Absolutely. Although I'm glad we didn't see it in 3D.
Oh my god, it was so so I saw this once before I brought Winchester and her fiance out. And I saw it in 3D because that was all that was available the night that I decided to go check it out. I think it was actually opening night. Like, on a whim, me and my buddy just went to go check it out. And we could only do a 3D show. It was so disorienting in 3D. Oh my god. If you want to go see it in 3D, I don't discourage that. Go see it in 2D first. Because you want to know what's going on before you're that disoriented. Because I missed things entirely.
Well, a lot of the visual effects are like staring at one of those Find the Image books.
Oh, well, they used fractals.
Right.
They used which was beautiful because if anybody has ever done hallucinogens, like, fractal imaging is the way that hallucinations work. Basically, your brain looks at something, is like presented the information that is around you and everything, and it sees patterns, and because it's being tricked into like doing more than it's supposed to, it plays off of those patterns and expands on them, and you suddenly like start to watch your world visually change around you. And they captured that very nicely in this. And obviously the reason that you would go with that approach, like, why would you mimic a hallucinogenic? Well, because the space between like dreams and hallucinogens and spiritual ritual and stuff throughout time has all been very, very linked and very, very connected. So when you're doing a spiritual, time ancient movie like this, going off of, what psychedelics has presented to people in the past is a great way to kind of visually represent this great cosmic effect that's taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was very interesting to watch on the big screen, and like let's just go right off the bat, the visual effects. And for the most part, Marvel's visual effects have held up. They have the budget now, especially. But the idea, just watching, and even if you just watch the trailers, just watching the city shift and change and turn into, like, certain pillars will turn into gears, so it turns into almost this mechanical being, and part of it's a little Inception-y, obviously.
Well, I mean,
but that's kind of the point.
That's the point. And I mean, honestly, if we're gonna get real for a second, if you look at some of those old Doctor Strange comics, they did especially when they were talking about like the mirror world and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, they would do like reflections like that, where you would see like the city like reflected in the sky and things like that, like you saw like in Inception, where it's folding in on itself. So Inception borrowed, not necessarily as visually, like, it kind of came up with the visualization itself in its own way, but certainly the concept of folding matter and stuff came from a lot of Doctor Strange comics and things like it in the first place. So, this is an example of like where nerd fandom in particular, just it's always a sharing pool of ideas and resources, and so
kind
like
of circling it.
And Inception just did a beautiful job of presenting what it's like when like reality and matter kind of fold in on themselves, even though it was done in a dreamscape. That is, what matter folding would kind of look like.
Right.
So of course they're gonna rip it off.
It's true. Although I doubt that they stuck their main actor. I doubt they stuck Benedict in a rotating hallway like they did for poor Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Because that was practical effects in the hotel in Inception. They actually spun him around. They were on wires. That was all practical effects.
Just for that one scene.
For that one scene.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that they stuck Benedict into. Like, I'm sure. To be fair,
actually,
it
that
looked like some of it.
Some of that hallway scene where he they've got like there's this cool. So there's like a bunch of different like I can't remember what they call them, but they're basically like sanctuaries and like protector locations that help beat off the metaphysical realm and all the dangers of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were in the one that's in New York, there was like this window display, and there's these 3 windows
really cool.
that you could like shift like where the portal in those windows went to. It was super awesome. But anyway, there's like a hallway that like connected to, and there's this big fight scene that took place in the hallway. And I think a lot of that might have been practical effects, because there was a lot of it that like seemed very natural. And actually, one of the best things about the effects is like you do when you have CGI, there are certain things that look cartoonish, but a lot of times people will work really, really hard on taking off the cartoonish edge, and they didn't do none of that.
No.
Like, the CGI looked like CGI, but you know what
did.
you know what did look really good? Benedict in it. That was what they worked really, really hard on, was making the transition between the actual person that they were filming and putting it into this CGI mess. And they did a really effective job. Even though, like, you could see, like, there's this one scene where, like, he's in this vision where, like, hands are crawling all over him because, of course, he's, like, tormented by his broken hands. And, like, you could tell the hands were very, very fake, but yet at the same time, they very convincingly touched him and, like, interacted with him. And there were shits, like, where he, like, went from, like, a real person into, like, a CGI kaleidoscope kind of situation with the fractals and everything. And the transition was really clean, and it looked really, like, again, like, he looked like he was supposed to be in there. It didn't look like they had just thrown him behind a green screen, which is what can happen a lot of times with that. So I'm glad that's where they put the focus, because they could have spent months trying to polish all of the other, like, CGI background stuff, and it wouldn't have looked that much better for it, but they spent so much time and energy clearly integrating him. And bravo, guys, bravo. It looked really sharp.
Yeah, and you have to with a movie like this. Certain movies in the Marvel Universe, not so much. Like, Civil War, didn't really have to. There wasn't a whole lot that was CGI heavy, that wasn't explosions or, you know, mechanical things or anything like that.
So you can make it nicer.
Arm.
You can polish it up a little bit.
Right, but with Doctor Strange, because of the nature of the story, you have to have that integration. You have to have it still believable, but still a whole different plane. Literally.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and things like, I don't know how much was light tricks and how much was CGI with, like, his, like, rope techniques and stuff, and, like, all those sigils that they would burn into the air. But clearly they were using at least a little bit of, like, the old school, like, light over, like, effect that, like, you used to see in, like, the old Ghostbusters movies and stuff, because it definitely had that, like, quality to it, or at least they found a way to give it that quality, which I really appreciate, because I thought it gives it like, all of, like, the visualizations of what he's in different universes and stuff, and looking through time and everything, that all looked very cartoonish. The fire rope and stuff like that looked really sharp. Like, that, and again, it was
portals.
because it directly contacted things in the real world, and those were the things that they spent a lot. Those knives that they, like, kind of are just, like, sort of, like, weird hazy energy or whatever. Those looked really good. Anything that actually had to touch somebody looked really. And again, that's where they spent their time. They integrated people, and it looked phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely.
But beyond just so the visualizations, obviously we've been talking about them now for almost 10 minutes, and they are spectacular. I mean, they are really that good. This movie is almost worth seeing just for the visuals. Like, if you enjoyed Avatar, which I don't understand, you probably will enjoy Doctor Strange, because visually speaking, it is stunning.
Definitely see it on the big screen.
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure. But storyline-wise, it also was really fun. I mean, it was a very simple, straightforward story. There wasn't a lot of twists and turns to it. You saw a lot of the punches coming, but it was a good origin story.
Yeah.
Now, here's the one thing I don't like about the story, So, when I originally knew Doctor Strange was coming, and they spent a lot of time talking about different dimensions in the trailer, I assumed that this might be their time to declare that things like the Netflix original series that have been coming out, and even things like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. don't take place inside of the same universe. They take place inside of like some kind of parallel universe or whatever. Well, that's not been true. We've been concluded that it is all the same universe. But sadly, almost as if they concluded that they were different, separate universes, we're never going to watch any of those things touch, and it was pretty much confirmed in this movie. There is a rather iconic Doctor Strange scene that was done in this movie without one of the key characters. And that key character is Night Nurse. There's a scene where he is having surgery performed on him. He is having blood drained out of his chest. And it's his old doctor girlfriend, who basically, if I understand correctly, they pretty much invented for this movie, or she's been around in the comics, but only in very brief doses. She's not a super well-known character. And she basically replaced Night Nurse in this scene where he astro projects out of the astroplane to talk to him a bit higher, if you would. And this is a very iconic scene in a Doctor Strange book where he's being treated by Night Nurse, and she, like, of course, sees his ghost pop, and she's like, "What the?" And that's what we got in this, except with his, like, old doctor girlfriend, essentially. So that, I mean, it might not be a confirmation, but that was as good of a seal as any that, like, yeah, no, all those characters you see on Marvel, all those characters that you see on ABC's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that's where they're staying. They're not interacting with the movie universe. Don't hope for it. Don't expect it. Which is really sad, because I think that that's a missed opportunity to not at least venture that to something, even if it was just Night Nurse. Like, that for me would have been enough, to just have Night Nurse bouncing around these films and bouncing around the different Netflix shows, because that's who Night Nurse is. Night Nurse doesn't really have her own comic series. I think they've done it like once or twice, and it's never like really stuck. Night Nurse, however, is featured in tons of Marvel stuff because she's one of the most useful characters ever.
Right.
Like, super low-key, discreet, like, technically not a doctor, but probably has surgery capabilities, like, on par with a young Strange before he got his PhD. You know what I mean? Like, she's extraordinarily talented. She's way better than a nurse. Just has never been able to afford the med school. And she's a very cool character, and I wish I could see her bounce around. But these worlds are separate. I just hope that maybe thematically they can get things more involved. Like, maybe during the Infinity Wars, we might see angles of the Infinity War itself take place through the Netflix shows, and
I could see them going through the Netflix shows as opposed to S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. is very much... Now, I'm not completely caught up. I'm about a season behind. But I feel like S.H.I.E.L.D. very much pulled away from the MCU very early on.
Well, that was actually due to the backlash on the studio thing, which was that was
Right.
the other part of it that you saw at the beginning of this. They don't do the normal Marvel intro. They
don't.
They do a brand new spanking Marvel Studios intro, just to make sure that you're aware that Marvel and Marvel Studios are not working together, and the other one basically thinks that the other one can go fuck itself. There were essentially, after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came out in the first place, huge amounts of disagreements popped up between the various workers of the films and now this new TV show, and it eventually it caused a split down the studio where you now have Marvel and then Marvel Studios, even though Marvel is its own studio. I don't know how the naming got actually chosen for that shit, but there you go. Like, Marvel and Marvel Studios, while all part of Disney, while all a part of like the greater Marvel branch inside of Disney, separate studios totally responsible for their own stuff. And the original Marvel is willing and tries occasionally to keep up with things.
Often.
Marvel Studios has made it like the president of it has like basically come out and like, I don't watch the ABC show. I don't really care.
To be fair, it's it's a lot easier to adapt the TV show to these multi-billion-dollar movies that are taking months to produce.
No. You always adapt the TV show. I mean, in the case of, and that's the stupid part too with the Netflix thing, especially, is that Marvel Studios is the one doing the Netflix shows. So I don't understand why there's that disconnect there. But he even had that was the weirdest part, is that he said like he didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he kind of made this like side note of like, and I don't really pay attention to what's going on in my own studio as far as the Netflix shows are concerned. It was like,
which is a shame, because the Netflix stuff is phenomenal.
It is. It's really phenomenal.
You get away from the colored spandex and get to the quote unquote realer superheroes, like the nitty gritty. Almost.
Yeah.
You get away from the star spangled nonsense, and you get to the people that are literally on the streets.
You break away from the first Minutemen and realize that the comedian's a rapist. Like, that's
exactly
what the Netflix show is, basically.
Exactly.
And you know, that was like the one bad thing about this film, is that in a number of different, between Night Nurse and that new opening, they've made it a very clear, because that's the thing, even though it's Marvel Studios for the Netflix shows, their opening still matches the old Marvel opening.
Right.
So this to me at least is a very clear message. This like, in those couple of subtle ways, really highlighted, no, it's not happening. We're not making contracts to get like who's it's from what into this. And that's disappointing for a number, because, I mean, not only do you not have any kind of connection between these worlds, like, you don't have things like Spider-Man being the head of the New York Defenders.
Right.
And their liaison, essentially, to the Avengers and shit. Like, that totally gone now. Never mind that Spider-Man is going to be operating pretty much entirely in New York City because his whole web-slinging thing doesn't work outside of it very well. No, now he's a part of the Avengers and is stuck there and can't interact with the actual New York Defenders, who he makes more sense pairing up with. And that was my one thing where this film is like, was sitting there watching it like, this was amazing. Marvel might have just reached past its heyday, though, and might be starting to take this downward shift that I am kind of concerned about, because I think now the pressure is on to make all of these movies and all these shows that have been promised, and I don't know if they're going to continue to get the same care that they once did, and I am worried about that. Or maybe I've got the wrong sense and they thought very long and hard about doing those things and didn't think they could give them the care if there was too much character crossover.
That might be it, is that we had the same worry with Civil War, the worry we have with Infinity Wars, is that there's just too many characters. If you get too many characters, then it's just very vague, and you get the very shallow storyline of good versus evil, but then you don't get to connect. Like, okay, to be fair, the original Avengers, we know their stories. We know everything about them, we get that. But even the new stuff, or if they brought in Jessica Jones or Luke Cage or what have you, I feel like they would get very much overshadowed by Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man,
I fully agree. And my argument only with that, I think you've got a point, and maybe it's better to not have to put actors in that position where they're getting totally like outclassed. But I mean, I don't know. That seems like it's a good challenge for them at the same time too.
It's not so much even actors. It's a lot of characters. Whereas you see the Avengers as a global scale and how they affect the world. Whereas Jessica Jones and the Defenders and Daredevil, even, it's within a neighborhood. It's within not even a city. It's within Hell's Kitchen. Like, you see the effects, because they talk about, in the first season of Daredevil, they talk about the Battle of New York, which at one point I watched it the first time and I had no idea what the fuck they were talking about. I'm like, Battle of New York, what? And then it dawned on me, right, Avengers 1.
Yeah.
But then you see the micro, not the macro. You see the micro of it, the individual effects of my house got destroyed because some asshole superhero busted through it. You see the comic book of the guy there's a comic book Marvel has that they put out. I don't remember what it's called, but it's literally a group of insurance agents.
I
think we've talked about it too.
Yeah, we have talked about this too. Yeah, I can never remember the team's name, but it's literally
insurance agents.
Yeah, like an insurance team that developed because of like superheroes being a thing, essentially. Yeah, I can't remember who they are, but yeah, no, that is definitely a thing. And you're right, the shows are more the microcosm, or at least the Netflix shows are.
The Netflix shows.
That's the thing, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the very least, like you feel like, and that's where the big problem really is that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is run by the studio that the main studio no longer really likes working with.
Right. They started off connected and then had to drift away, whether it was per story because it's easier to adapt the TV show to connect with the movies. At the same time, you can't really do it because the TV show is moving so quickly that at one point they barely touched. So they did a great integration with Cap 1 in the Fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought that was phenomenal. It was a
they
turning
actually
point.
really did do a great job.
It was a turning point to make the show great, because at that point you're like, yeah, whatever, and then it turns and I was hooked. And then they kind of did it with Thor, Dark World, and then they didn't really do it with anything else. And then Cap 2 came out.
Oh, and they did.
They did kind of.
Well, it was kind of cool that they were responsible for the building of that helicarrier.
Right. Yes. And then you had Ultron.
Oh no, that was Ultron.
It was Ultron.
I'm sorry, that was Ultron. Yeah, no, Cap
and they
2
mentioned
really don't do much with.
They don't.
But that's the thing, is that the separation seems very, very permanent, which sucks, because I did want to see like people like Agent Daisy Johnson, do their thing. I wanted to see the Avengers meet up with Coulson again and have that realization of like, you didn't die and you've just been hiding for like, fuck you. Next time you die and then come back, you come say hi, asshole.
Right.
Like, that reckoning may never actually come now, which really sucks. And the thing was, like, yes, like, maybe, like, some of the other heroes might be getting outshined by people like Robert Downey Jr. and stuff. So what? They're not in there to up the ante on the movies themselves. They're there to pay homage to all of the fans out there who not only have been watching your films, but watching all of these fucking side projects happen too around the film and have been getting invested in your cinematic universe. That's why you do that. You do it as a shout out to the people who have really been paying attention and have been hanging on to every thread that you've offered them. Not because, like, they're going to keep class necessarily. And it's fine if you do them for cameos. It's literally, if, like, Luke Cage shows up in a major Marvel film for 30 seconds, I'm ecstatic as a fan. I'm like a fan when we originally saw Stan Lee in this shit. You know what I mean? Like, when Stan Lee started showing up in Spider-Man and in Iron Man films and shit. That was amazing. That was incredible for us because, like, you know, it was this iconic guy, and even though it was just for 30 seconds, it was a great shout out. And I think that's, like, fans like me who really want to see all of these shows connect and so on, that's all we want. We want a little bit of recognition. We want, like I said, something simple like Night Nurse just kind of popping through and shit. Like, you know, like, goes through all the Netflix shows like she's going to. She's obviously the big connection between all the Netflix shows is Night Nurse. But you know, you could have her be interviewed by S.H.I.E.L.D. as far as like the Inhumans that she's like in contact with and stuff in like one scene. You could have her pop in like in one scene where an Avenger goes down and has to get treated like in like some back alley or something. Like, again, these minor things are just stuff that you can do to kind of like, hey, tip the hat to the fans who have been chunking over the money so that all of these things can like stay alive and that you can have this massive cult following that you now have. Because you're welcome. It's us. It's us who made this happen for you. So
that's very true. That's very true. But to get back to the movie.
Yes. So let's
get back to the movie.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the actors.
Yes. Okay. First, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Way better.
Amazing Strange. Just
pretty decent American accent.
The American accent was right on point.
I was very blown away.
I hardly heard any kind of Britishism in there, like every once in a while. But like he would even do some things that like I wouldn't have really expected. Like certain phrases like went really American, like beyond the point that like some Americans talk and stuff. And
it was almost like it was he would say it. It was just like small colloquialisms.
Yes.
That we don't even hear when we speak. But hearing him say it, I'm so used to him being Sherlock. I'm so used to him being, you know, this British, it's, you know, Shakespearean, etc. That he would say certain things that we say on a daily basis without realizing it, and you kind of have to stop. Like my brain would stop and go, wait a second, and you go, no, yeah, that's what we sound like.
Yeah. No, that was it. And he was very, very funny. His comedic timing was great, but still very dry, which is what Strange needs to be. And it just, I don't know, like, he had, like, the right touch to everything. Like, he was an asshole, but you didn't hate him at all. Like, you actually, like, as much of a dick Stephen Strange was, you liked Stephen. Immediately you liked Stephen. From the first moment, like, the first time you see Stephen, he's in an operating room listening to music, and he's challenged a fellow doctor to, like have him guess, like, the name of the song, who wrote it, and what year it came out. And he'd be, like, doing it, like, perfectly. And this is, like, while he was, like, performing brain surgery and shit. So, obviously, this guy's got an ego, and he's super cocky. But at the same time, that's kind of fucking hilarious. And you're just kind of like, this guy would actually be great to hang out with. Like, this guy would be phenomenal at a party.
It was almost reminiscent of the early Tony Stark, early Iron Man movies where he's talking with Jarvis.
Yes.
Where Tony's in his workshop. Like, even when he's working on the first real Iron Man suit. And he's talking to Jarvis and, like, actually having conversations, or Jarvis would say something, because Jarvis's wit is just fucking
man.
Jarvis is one of my favorite characters.
Actually, to be perfectly honest with you, I was devastated when Jarvis died.
Oh, well, yeah, I think we all were. I love Friday. Friday is very, very...
Friday's great.
I wish we got more Friday. but Jarvis is the original just kind of snark, like
Yes.
AI snark.
Yes.
And this was very reminiscent of that, of the early. We go back to, because we went through the whole Iron Man Tony, egotistical, it's like Christmas with more me kind of Tony, and he gets a little humbler. He gets kind of broken, and we go back to a character who's not in the beginning. He's cocky, but he's still good at what he does. He's worked very hard.
And again, and maybe it is just because simply what he does is save people, and maybe that's why he's so likable.
Selfless
work
occupation
that he makes very selfish,
Yes.
which is kind of hilarious into of itself. And actually, if you ever have time to look into psychology papers about the egomaniacal nature of doctors,
that's a thing.
Fascinating shit.
That's definitely,
Fascinating
especially
shit.
surgeons,
Oh, God,
especially
yes.
brain surgeons.
Yes.
That's it. They definitely, in creating this character and in Benedict pulling into him, they definitely, you could tell that research was done in his personality.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I was very happy with him. I like Benedict. I fell in love with Sherlock and all this other jazz, but at the same time I was like, don't know if I would have picked him. He definitely
nailed
blew
it.
my mind.
He nailed it
definitely
completely. And I wouldn't have thought of him as like the right look, but I guess because probably I never had before that never seen him with facial hair. Like I'd never seen what that was gonna look like, and I was like, I don't know that I don't think that was actually his real goatee. I think they actually did like use a prosthetic.
I'm sure they did.
Probably.
I'm sure they did.
But it looked good on him, and he looked totally right at that moment. It was just like, oh, wow, no, like the angular face and everything too, like adds like his Strange is always drawn with a super angular long face, to kind of just give him, basically sharper images, like because just sharp features on somebody makes them look a little bit more terrifying, and Strange was always supposed to look very, I am from the mystic beyond.
Right.
And he pulled it off. And, he pulled off somebody who could look like that because he's not there
he's
yet.
not there yet.
And actually, that's my favorite part of this story is that
Definitely.
we have an incomplete Strange.
He's not a master.
Yeah,
yet.
even by the end
he's
of
not
it.
even a master.
No. Well, it's arguable
kinda
that she gives him
I
that
guess.
title. She gives him that title, and it's never disputed from that point on, and he's
Right.
acting like a master by the end of it.
Right.
But he does not take the title Sorcerer Supreme by the end of it.
No.
And he is not wearing the Eye of Agamotto, although that is a huge thing in it, like one of the big plot points. In fact, it's part of how he defeats the big bad. And I don't want to give spoilers on it exactly, but the way that he defeats the big bad is brilliant on a Greek mythology level.
Definitely.
It's simple and that it's brilliant in its simplicity is I guess what I want to say about it. It was just like wait, that means this, and it was the whole solution in one thought process, in one sweeping action, just like, oh, I've got this.
Right.
I can trick the god. Then that's what it was. It was a trickery of the god type of thing. And that's beautiful. Instead of like getting, because a lot of times, he in the comics he goes back and forth solving problems that way. But a lot of what like people famously know Strange for is he shows up and casts spells and like crazy shit happens, and like he can kind of like put the Hulk in like an alternate dimension where he can't hurt people and shit like that.
Right.
But we didn't watch that Strange. We watched a Strange who didn't know a whole lot and utilized what very little that he did know to defeat something that he had no business defeating, and it was glorious.
It was very nice to watch him struggle, because this kind of character, like, we watch a lot of our characters be the best at things, and because Avengers, they are the best at what they do. Black Widow is the best assassin. Hawkeye is the best marksman.
Tony, for whatever reason, can pilot that power armor like as soon as he gets into it.
Right. You've got Steve, who's the super soldier. It's he's the best at a lot of things he does. Seeing Strange, who is literally broken down and is struggling with something, because he even says, he's like, I did my PhD and my MD at the same time. But the fact that he struggles with something that some do not, like, he there's a scene where he's in a class basically, and it's set up kind of like a karate class or like a tai chi class where all the students are in lines and they're doing their exercises together, and he's the only one that can't conjure this magic. And you can watch him struggle with it, and I think Benedict got it very well.
Oh, not only did he do that well, but to me, the most impressive part of the whole thing was watching him finally get it.
Yeah.
Because, so there's this line about how he has to stop trying and sort of has to just ride the wave and let it happen, which he is very, very confused by that thought process, because it's very counterintuitive thinking. Like, I'm trying to conjure something, I must force it into existence. No, you sort of just tap it and ride the wave for it to come into existence. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, I'm gonna force you now. And when he has to actually have that, so you don't often get to see an actor have the opportunity to use like their body language in such a profound way. Like, a lot of actors are really great at using body language, and it adds a lot to scenes in a lot of cases. This went like a step beyond that. Like, you watched him, and I could just see taking apart like all of those very specific movements, and like how he, and just like he thought very hard about what does Strange look like when he's trying to force it versus when he actually understands how to kind of breathe and let it happen. And it's night and day in his body language, and it's like watching him relax and then focus at the same time was one of like it was a beautiful thing to watch, like both facially in expression and just his whole body just captured it perfectly. Like the man is an acting genius, like without a doubt. Like, I mean, if you've ever seen Sherlock, like that's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But I mean, like that moment, like I want to watch that moment where he figures out how to conjure a portal over and over and over again, because it's one of the better pieces of acting I've seen in the last few years for sure. Like, it was a phenomenal moment. I don't know how long they took to get that on set, but every second was worth it. It was beautiful.
It was definitely worth it. And I think so going away from Benedict a little bit, just the general, I don't think there was really an actor that missed their mark. I feel like almost everybody, there were certain times where you're like, there's always going to be those moments, those lines that you don't necessarily think that the character would have said or should have gone to a different character. But in this movie, I feel like, and there was tons of controversy over the casting in this, mostly with the Ancient One. Ancient One was originally supposed to be a Tibetan man. Now, according to IMDb, the reason they went with a woman, they wanted to switch it up, which I'm all for, because I think that's super cool.
Yeah, it was weird because there was a gender bend, but then a whitewash.
There was a gender bend, but a whitewash. But the gender bend was, they were thinking Asian woman, but they didn't want to
fetishize it, I believe.
Yeah.
Which I guess. And I definitely appreciate, because what Winchester had brought it, you talking about the fact that like when they did Memories of a Geisha and actually had a Tibetan actress in it, people flipped the fuck out in China.
Because that was another reason, was that because it's so huge in the Chinese market, they weren't sure if it would even be able to be released.
Yeah.
If they had a Tibetan woman or even a Tibetan
actor of any kind. And I understand not broaching that gap. Like, you're a comic book movie. You don't need to lead the front on that kind of thing. Your type of thing should be much smaller and much more subtle. That being said, I think you copped out a little bit with not just doing an Asian woman, like making her Japanese or Chinese or something like that. It's like, well, the fetishism. Well, here's an opportunity to do it and not make it fetishistic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there, and seriously, the way that she acted and the robes in it, you totally, like, actually that part would have been great for doing exactly that. Like, if you just done exactly that and put a Chinese woman in it, like, she's not fetishized at all.
She's not. And the fact that Tilda Swinton, who I think she did there were certain moments that I was almost brought back to Galadriel in Lord of the Rings. Like, she had that very ethereal voice.
Yeah.
That very ethereal, otherworldly kind of person. And they shaved her head. They made her look like a Tibetan monk. And someone has mentioned Tilda Swinton is very androgynous in her appearance, which in this movie, unless you like, obviously her voice is very feminine, and her facial features are a little more feminine, but they didn't accentuate anything.
Right. No,
Her
I mean,
robes, there's layers of robes that hide. She's basically this box of a figure. There's nothing. Pretty much all of the female, like the few female characters, nobody's like super sexualized.
No, nobody was, and I think actually like that would have been a cool moment to actually be like, hey, let's not sexually fetishize, Asian women. But I can understand maybe not wanting to take that risk too. I think you copped out there. I appreciate, again, the Tibet thing. I think that was the right call. I don't think you're the right movie to try to spearhead something like that.
No,
I
you're
think
not winning any Oscars. It's
yeah,
fine.
no, that I mean, not that you should be doing things like that, but I mean, you don't need to be controversial. You have a very specific agenda, and it's making people happy. And I don't think you should fuck with that too much. But I think doing the subtle thing is very cool. And I think while they caught that a little bit on the Asian thing, I think it's cool that they flipped her to a female. I think that was a interesting decision, and it especially gave a great moment for Strange, because when he assumes that it is that guy sitting there who looks like the old ancient one, we get to have this moment where he's like suddenly humbled by like, oh no, it's the woman serving tea in front of me.
Right.
Shit.
Well, and it kind of begins the whole forget everything you've ever known kind of step. It's a very obvious one, but it's a very, very much a, hey, not everything you see is what you're gonna, is what you should know about, like what you've known. So it was very interesting, and I feel like they should have brought somebody in, necessarily, but I think she did great.
I mean, that's the end. I'm very nitpicking on that for sure. And only because I found out it afterward. If I had never even heard about them considering doing that, and they were just like, no, we're just flipping to a woman and we just casted a woman, I wouldn't have given it a second thought at all, really, because she did do a really phenomenal job.
But it shows that a lot of times they can gender swap a role, and it's not gonna fucking matter.
Right. No, exactly. Like, no, it worked perfectly. It worked phenomenally. I thought she was brilliant. I thought she did a great job with it.
Yeah.
Also,
you're gonna try and pronounce his name, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce that name. Jesus. Clearly South African, I believe. Well, that accent alone kind of gives that away.
Chiwetel? No, that's not it.
No,
I'm
that's
just
not
gonna
it.
butcher
Let's stop butchering it.
it.
The gentleman who played Mordo. Let's just leave it at
Awful.
that.
I can't believe it. He's in pretty much everything. Like, if you
he
think
really
he's in...
no. If there's like a guy with kind of like that South African like accent, it's probably him.
He's in The Martian. He's actually, I think, like, besides Matt Damon, he's like the guy in The Martian. If I remember
because he's the guy like on the other side of the comm, right?
Yeah. He's the operative in Serenity. For all of the nerds in the room, he's the operative in Serenity, who is also very much, obviously, Serenity and Firefly bringing in the Asian influence, but the very Zen monk type character.
Yep.
And both of them struggling with that belief, struggling with the this is my mission.
He is Mordo in this is very similar to the operative. I hadn't really thought about that, but like, wow, yeah, that is a callback to that character. Yeah, because like, well, the cool thing about Mordo is, for anybody who's not super familiar with Strange and I'm not yet. I have read, I believe, one comic with Doctor Strange in it, and I'm pretty sure it was a Hulk comic. I'm pretty sure, like I said, like he came to like put Hulk somewhere else because Hulk was causing too many problems. That's my comic material reference for Doctor Strange. But I do my research and everything, and Mordo is supposed to be like this arch nemesis, this old arch nemesis who learned from the same school. Like so we got to watch the frenemy thing develop here, and it developed very, very nicely, because Mordo, the Ancient One, does not want to teach Strange at first because she does not appreciate his ego.
Yeah.
She thinks his ego is problematic, and it is, but she just simply has no interest in it, and Mordo is the one who convinces her dark times are ahead. We might need somebody like him who thinks way outside the box.
And she establishes the two sides of the same coin kind of relationship between them. That Strange needs his strength, and he needs Strange's I think she says flexibility.
I believe is the word she used.
So it was very. I'm hoping we see more of him. because.
Oh, I mean, well, certainly we're gonna see him in the second Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And maybe he'll make an appearance in Ragnarok. So another interesting thing to note at the end of all of this movie,
Two scenes, mid-credit and end-credit.
Wait, hang on. You know what? Before we jump ahead there, really quick, no, because seriously, I gotta give a shout out, like right now, to Benedict Wong for playing Wong. So Wong in the original Doctor Strange comics is Doctor Strange's manservant. They obviously were not going to do that this time around. So what did they do? He's the head of the library at the Sanctuary.
And apparently he's going to be in Infinity War.
Yeah, buddy. No, he did an amazing job. And that was the great thing is that, so he's the librarian now of the place that Strange is now kind of the master of, because there is no Sorcerer Supreme, and then he becomes Sorcerer Supreme, so he'll definitely be in charge of the dude. So they still get to have that, like, master-pupil relationship, but at a starting reverse kind of thing, where Wong is actually ahead of him, and he's just sort of this irritating student in Wong, a thorn in Wong's side, you know?
Exactly.
And he plays Wong so perfectly, because he has a sense of humor. It's just super dry. Like, you hear him laugh once, and it's actually one of the best parts. Wong laughing at the end is one of the best things.
It's pretty phenomenal.
I love it. So yeah, I definitely wanted to give a shout out on that one. Like, that was not only the writers beautifully handling the transition into a much more sensitive era, where we wouldn't have a white dude having an Asian manservant.
Right, exactly.
And at the same time still preserving what that character was supposed to be. And then, you know, the actor just blew it out of the park. He was exactly what it needed to be. Like, very dry but hilarious at the same time. And just, you know, as a character, just like not putting up with Strange's shit at all.
Which was nice, because I always like seeing the egotistical ones like Pepper and knocking Tony down a couple pegs, and just her being able to keep him on a leash when nobody else can. I love those kind of characters who just don't take any shit from the egotistical, pretty much the egotistical white dudes that have populated the MCU.
Yeah.
You always get the partner in crime, basically partner in justice, so to speak. That everyone's like, oh my god, Iron Man, oh my god, Doctor Strange. And they all just go, no, dude's an asshole. Like, yeah, he saves the world, but super douchebag. And I always appreciate characters like that. And I think
they're great. And also, again, before we get into the end credits thing, that is really important to talk about. Mads Mikkelsen,
Hannibal. Fucking phenomenal.
He played a spectacular villain. I'm not gonna go for the pronunciation on that name.
Mikkelsen, I believe it's pronounced.
Khaleesi? What?
Maybe.
No. His
character's
name.
name.
The character's name.
I don't. Yeah, they said it so many times. I
still
can't.
could not begin to pronounce that.
No.
We're sitting here with our IMDb pages out on our phones because we're like, how the fuck do you pronounce these characters' names again?
But no, he's in. Disney kind of snatched him from, because he's in the new Star Wars. He's in Rogue One. And I didn't even realize he was in Doctor Strange, and he's just this gem of this zealous guy, like this zealous pupil who, like, we get a little bit of backstory, but you can see how he got there just from the way his acting
Right,
was.
no, that's actually the beautiful part, is that you didn't need to spend a lot of time doing any kind of flashback work or anything like that with him, because his intentions and where he came from and what his goals are and why he is the way that he is are so clear. Yeah. So very clear. They didn't need to explain anything. You got it all just from the combination of the dialogue, and you're right, his acting just brought it all out in a rather spectacular way. And him and Cumberbatch played off of each other phenomenally. Oh, yeah. Their chemistry was hot. Like, if those two were like reset up for a different film where they'd be like, you know, like bros or something like that, oh man, I'm like in so hard, because they're
I would love to see them
in
in stuff
the chemistry
together.
is just off the chart, man.
Absolutely. So before we
before we wrap this whole thing up, which we do have to soon, we're way past our mark, but Strange is good enough to do that with. So there's two end scenes that are really important. Let's skip to the second end scene, the one at the end of the credits.
Okay.
And where we watch Mordor take out the guy who sent Strange to the monastery to study. And because, again, we get to watch him become the adversary of Strange. So that's very important. So we're going to see him again in Strange 2, quite clear, because as soon as that scene ends as well, we do say Doctor Strange will return.
Right.
So that one, is there establishing that, Mordor is going to be the antagonist, essentially, the main antagonist of Doctor Strange. But then there's this other scene. This quite possibly way more important scene where we see, we see Chris Hemsworth sitting across from Doctor Strange, and they're discussing Loki, and they're discussing Odin.
A missing Odin.
A missing Odin, which is very weird considering how we left off in Dark World. And I gotta say, Hemsworth not acting like Thor a whole lot.
No, we could easily be looking more into it than it actually is, but with the way that they've played the Thor movies and the way that they've played Loki, I don't think so.
I think it's Loki. I think Loki is sitting across disguised as Thor, and I don't know if this is Ragnarok or post-Ragnarok, because the weird thing, too, is that a lot of time passes in this movie. Clearly, it starts right after the events of Civil War, because they reference Don Cheadle's character being injured in the power armor suit, and his back being crippled and stuff. Strange gets presented the case and turns it down because it's not interesting enough.
And you see a shot of the new Avengers Tower. So it's very obviously after Civil War.
Yep. So with that in mind, we then have this weird period of time where he's trying to save his hands through conventional means, or more conventional means anyway. And we're led to believe probably at least a year passes.
I would imagine because the other doctor that he talks to, Christine Palmer, Rachel McAdams' character, mentions that he's blown through all of his money.
Yeah, he's broke.
With the way that he presents himself in the beginning of the movie, before the accident, he drives this souped up, I'm assuming it's some sort of Lamborghini or sports car, has a billion Rolexes, is dressed very nicely, very New York surgeon.
Yeah, no, this
has
guy...
the money. And if he's blown through it, we can assume that recovery and the experimental treatments he's been trying have, I would imagine, at least a year.
It has to be at least that long. And so then he goes, to this shrine and this place in I think he's in Tibet actually.
Kathmandu, yeah.
Oh, Kathmandu, okay. And he spends a good deal of time there, where it's very unclear how long, but that has to be another year. So we're talking about by the time this film ends and the time he's having that conversation with
2 years.
Whoever, at least 2 years. So, or this is the most accelerated shit ever, and he blew through some money hard on those experimental surgeries. Wow.
But just even the recovery time.
I mean, I don't. I mean, if they're gonna. They couldn't push it past a year. That'd be the fastest. Maybe he blew through everything in 6 months. And then in a couple of months found the place, and in within 4 had studied as much as he had. And it really excelled through the ranks and everything.
But at least...
It didn't feel like that.
No, it definitely didn't. And with the way that... Because Strange returns to, I guess you could say, quote-unquote, normal New York. And Christine Palmer, again, finds him, and she acts like she hasn't seen him in months, let alone from the way she says it sounds like it's almost years, at least a year.
Yeah, no, because after all this time, it's not something you say when you've seen somebody 6 months ago.
No.
Not at all. Maybe a year, and even then it feels a little... I want to say 2 years. So I'm not positive this is pre-Ragnarok. If it is pre-Ragnarok and we're going to be seeing... Because I think Strange is in Ragnarok. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not yet. We'll check that in a second. But if he is going to be in Ragnarok, and this is a pre-Ragnarok clip, then definitely it's Loki. There's no question, because according to all other Asgardians, Odin is sitting on the throne that he's always been sitting on, because nothing's wrong, because Loki took his spot.
Yes, Stephen Strange is in Ragnarok.
Yeah, okay. So if this is a pre-Ragnarok conversation, like, Ragnarok has to take place some good deal of time after the events of Civil War. And now, fortunately, they have the luxury of not having to keep, like, the same time frame as us. Like, they never mention what year it is.
No.
Ever in any Netflix shows on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
They don't reference, like,
Never.
a president. They don't reference the regular world. Really.
Yeah, and they for good reason, because they need to be able to play with things like this. So, and again, I don't know. I mean, if he's in Ragnarok, then yeah, this has to be a pre-Ragnarok conversation. So that has to be Loki sitting there.
Either pre or current, like,
or during, like, the
midst of it.
Like, maybe
because they do that. Like,
I mean, we might see that scene just take place again in Ragnarok.
They've done that a couple
before.
times.
Yeah.
They've done it with Cap. Cap's end scene after Cap 1 is Fury coming to recruit him for the Avengers in the gym, in the boxing gym. So they've done it before, and I would assume that depending on where it is, I could see them having done it again, because they always set up for a next movie. Setting up with Thor and Ragnarok gets us interested in the Ragnarok stuff.
Yeah.
Because I would assume that they're trying to bulk on the popularity. There's not as much popularity with Banner and Thor.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep this next part before we hit this hour mark here. But I just want to talk about that thing that we were talking about in the parking lot right quick. Okay, so they mentioned that in the Eye of Agamotto is one of the Infinity Stones. Like, this is mentioned in a very, very kind of, like,
blatant
really?
way.
You weren't going to, like,
Did you not
softball
get
it in at all?
Yeah.
But anyway, no, they just kind of blurted it out, like, oh, by the way, we needed to mention this shit in case you guys didn't actually know, like, the
in case you didn't
whatever.
It
was more shoehorned than the love story, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But now that we have that tidbit of information, now that we know that all 5 stones have revealed themselves, we kind of, like, backtracked and, like, well, where did all the stones wind up at? Because the Guardians have got one, and now, okay, so Strange has got one, and the Guardians got one, and then there's, like, another one in Vision. Where did those other 2 go? Oh, well, I guess the Tesseract got taken back to Asgard, and I guess after the Dark Elves were defeated, 2 of the stones are in Asgard.
Yeah.
So we're kind of thinking Ragnarok might be really the start of the Infinity Stone. We might watch an assault on Asgard.
Well, and now that we're talking about the possibility of it being Loki has been very attracted to the Infinity Stones. He has had contact with 2.
Yeah.
3. So Tesseract, his staff, and the Dark Elf one, the red one. So him trying to get Strange to help find Odin, quote unquote, could very easily be a ploy to get close to the Eye and the Time Stone.
Very possible.
Because if he knows that Strange has it, let's be fair, it's Loki. Like,
I mean, Loki totally just knows these kind of things. Loki has got,
and he's got the ego to think that he can get it away from Strange.
Oh, absolutely he does.
So
actually, that's gonna be the best part, watching Loki and Strange's egos, like, play off of each other. And actually, I'm looking forward to those 2 and Tony Stark and all
Lord.
3 of those egos in the same room, because that conversation is gonna be hilarious dick waving.
That's exactly what it's gonna be. So it'll be interesting to see. We've got Ragnarok coming up next year. We've got Guardians 2 coming up next year.
Baby Groot.
Baby Groot! If you haven't seen the preview, go watch it. It's pretty good. And then 2018 will be Infinity War 1. I don't think Infinity War 2 comes out until 2019 or 2020. Also Black Panther, probably 2018 or late 2017. So we've got some work cut out for us.
Yeah, there's some more things to come before we figure out what's happening with these Infinity Wars. I think it's gonna start in Asgard, man, and they got 2 of those stones. Yep. Anyway, though, as far as Doctor Strange, oh my god, go see it. And I don't have time to properly talk about it, but that cape is the greatest ally ever.
So
greatest
good.
sidekick imaginable.
Think Aladdin's magic carpet.
Yes.
And it's got the same kind of personality.
It really does. It really does, and it works phenomenally with his personality. It works better with his personality than Aladdin's. It's beautiful. It's hilarious. Go see Doctor Strange. This has been the Geek for All show. We're going to be signing off now. All of you take care and have an excellent evening, and go check out Marvel's Doctor Strange.
Nice.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The music for the Geek for All show has been provided by Fat Street Beats, Ben Sound, and Purple Planet. Please support their individual pages.